Hello, and welcome to your final segment of your reading homework. This is the final segment of your reading homework. We're starting on page 99. Page 99. And figuring he could buy a couple of mugs of tobacco from the Latvian in Barrack 7 and pay back the loan later, he said quietly to the Estonian fisherman, "Listen, Ido, lend me a little till tomorrow, just enough for one cigarette. You know I won't gyp you." Ido looked Shukov straight in the eyes and then looked down at his bosom pal. They always shared and shared alike and wouldn't use a single shred of tobacco without the other knowing. They said something to each other under their breath, and Ino got out his pouch stitched with pink cord. He took some tobacco and put it in Shukov's hand. Then he had another look and threw in a few more strands, just enough to make a cigarette, but no more. Shukov had some newspaper. He tore a piece of off, rolled a cigarette, and lit it with a cinder that had fallen between the boss's feet. And then he dragged and dragged on it, excuse me, over and over again. He had a giddy feeling all over his body, like it was going to his feet as well as his head. The minute he started to smoke, he saw a pair of green eyes flashing at him from the other end of the shed. It was Fitikov. He might have taken pity on that scavenger, but he had been cadging already today. Shukov had seen him at it. Better leave the butt for Senka Klefshkin. He couldn't hear the boss's story. Poor devil was just sitting there in front of the stove with his head on his side. The boss's face, so guys remember the boss is Tyrion, and Tyrion had been telling the men parts of his life story. Okay, so just kind of give you a reminder there. So the boss's face, it was all pockmarked, was lit up about the fire. He told his story without pity, like it wasn't about himself. "I sold the junk I had for a quarter of its worth to a dealer and brought 2 loaves of bread on the black market. They'd brought in ration cards by then. I thought I'd get home by riding freights, but they just put off some tough laws against that, and you couldn't get tickets then. Remember, even with money, never mind without it. They only gave them out for vouchers and for travel orders. You couldn't even get into the station. They had militiamen at the gates and guards on both sides of the tracks. The sun was going down and the puddles were freezing over. Where could I spend the night? I climbed a brick wall, jumped over with my 2 loaves of bread, and got into a station latrine. I hid out there for a while, but there was no one after me. Then I came out, just like I was a passenger, a soldier in uniform. The Valdisvostok Moscow was standing right there on the track. There was a great scramble for getting boiling water, and people were hitting each other on the head with their kettles. There was a girl in a blue dress with a large tea kettle, but she was too scared to try and get some water, afraid she'd get her tiny little feet scalded or crushed. "Here, hold these," I said, and gave her my loaves. "I'll get it for you." By the time I got it, the train was just ready to go. She was standing there with my loaves and crying and didn't know what to do with them. She wouldn't have minded losing her kettle. "Run," I shouted. "Run. I'll come after you." So she made a dash for the train. I caught up with her and pushed her into the coach. The train was already moving with one arm and then jumped on myself. The conductor didn't try to hit me over the knuckles or push me off. There were other soldiers in the coach, and he thought I belonged with them. Shukov nudged Senka in the ribs for him to take the butt, poor devil. He gave it to him in his wooden holder. Let him have a draw on it. It didn't matter. Senka was a real character. He put his hand on his heart and bowed like an actor on stage. The boss went on. There were 6 other girls in the compartment. It was reserved, students from Leningrad. They were going back home from some field work or another. They had bread and butter and all kinds of fancy things on the table in front of them. Their coats were hung up on their hooks, and they had covers on their suitcases. They didn't know what real life was. They'd had it easy all the way. We talked and joked and had tea together. Then they asked me what coach I'd come from. I sighed and told them the truth. "Girls," I said, "and the coach I come from, you can't live." It was quiet in the shed. The stove was blazing. After a lot of ohing and ahhing, they had a little talk and hid me under their coats on the top bunk. They got me all the way to Novosibirsk like that. By the way, I met one of those girls later in one of the Pekarov camps and did her a favor in return. She'd been picked up in 35 over the Kirov business, and she was just about on her last leg doing hard. I managed to fix her up in one of the workshops. "Maybe I should start making the mortar," Pavlo asked the boss in a whisper. The boss didn't hear him. He went on with the story. "I got home late one night and went in through the back garden. I went away again the same night and took my kid brother with me. I took him down to front where it's warmer. I had no food for him or me. They were making tar in a cauldron on one of the streets there, and a gang of youth thugs was sitting around it. I went and sat down with them, and I said, 'Listen here, gentlemen of the gutter. Take this kid brother of mine and give him an education. Teach him how to live.' And they did. Sorry I didn't go with them myself." "And you never saw your brother again?" asked the captain. The boss yawned. "No, I never saw him again," and he yawned once more. Then he said, Don't worry, boys. We'll make ourselves at home in the power plant. You boys making the mortar better get busy. Don't wait for the whistle. That's how it was in your gang. The higher-ups had a job to get a prisoner to work even in the working hours, but your boss only had to say the word, even if it was a meal break, and you worked, because it was the boss who fed you, and he wouldn't make you work if you didn't have to. If they didn't start making the mortar before the whistle, the men laying the bricks would be held up. Shukov sighed and got up. I'll go and clear the ice. He took a hatchet and a warm brush for the ice, a bricklayer's gavel, a yardstick, and a plumb line. Kilkus looked at Shukov and made a face as if to ask what he meant by going on ahead of the boss. Kilkus didn't have to worry about food for the gang. What did he care how much bread they got? He did all right on packages from home. All the same, he got to his feet. He knew he couldn't hold up the gang just for himself. Hold it, Ivan. I'll come along too, he said. Trust old Moonface. If he'd been working for himself, he had been on his feet even sooner. And another reason Shukov was in a hurry. He wanted to grab the plumb line before Kilgas. They'd only gotten one from the tool shop. Will there be 3 laying the bricks, Pablo asked the boss. Should we put another man on, or won't there be enough mortar? The boss frowned and thought a while. I'll be the 4th man myself, Pablo. And what's that about the mortar? The mixture's so big you could put 6 men on the job. You take the stuff out on one end while it's being mixed at the other. You just see we're not being held up a single minute. Pablo jumped up. He was a young fellow and he had been a good color. He still hadn't been too hard hit by life in the camps, and his cheeks were still round from eating those Ukrainian dumplings back home. If you lay bricks, he said, I'll make the mortar, and we'll see who works the fastest. Where's the biggest shovel around here? That's what these gangs did to a man. There was Pablo who used to carry a gun in the forest and make raids on villages. Why the hell should he kill himself with work in this place? But there's nothing you wouldn't do for your boss. Shukov went up with Kilgas. They could hear Senka coming up the ladder after them. He'd gotten the idea, deaf as he was. The walls for the 2nd story had only just started, 3 rows of bricks all around and a little higher in places. This was the quickest part of the job, here from knee level up to your chest, and no need to stand on scaffolds. The scaffolds had all been carted off by the other prisoners, either taken away to other buildings or burned, just so nobody could have them. Now, to do a decent job, they'd have to make new ones the next day. If not, they'd be stymied. You could see a lot from the top of the plant, the whole compound covered with snow and not a soul in sight. The prisoners were all under cover, trying to get warm before the whistle blew. The black watchtowers and the pointed poles with barbed wire. You couldn't see the wire if you looked into the sun, only if you looked away from it. It was shiny and your eyes couldn't stand the light. And close by you could see the steam engine that made the power. It was smoking like hell and making the sky black. Then it started breathing hard. It always wheezed like a sick man before it sounded the whistle. There it came now. They hadn't put in that much overtime after all. Hey, Stakhanovite, hurry up with that plumb line, Kilgas tried to hustle him. Look at all the ice on your part of the well. Shukov jeered back at him. Do you think you can clear it off by the evening? That trial won't be much good to you if you don't. They were going to lay the walls they'd set on in the morning, but then the boss shouted up at them. Hey there, we'll work to a wall so the mortar doesn't freeze in the hods. You take Senka on your wall, Shukov, and I'll work with Kilgas. Meanwhile, Pavlo will clean off Kilgas' wall for me. Shukov and Kilgas looked at each other. He was right. It would be easier like that. They grabbed their picks. Shukov no longer saw the view with the glare of sun on the snow, and he didn't see the prisoners leaving their shelters either and fanning out over the compound, some to finishing holes started in the morning, and others to put up rafters on the roofs of the workshops. All he saw now was the wall in front of him, from the left-hand corner where it was waist high to the right-hand corner where it was joined up with Kilgas's. He showed Senka where to hack off the ice, and he hacked away at it himself for all he was worth with the head and blade of his pick, so that chips of ice were flying all around and in his face too. He was doing a good job and he was fast, but his mind wasn't on it. In his mind he could see the wall under the ice. The outside wall of the power plant was just 2 bricks thick. He didn't know the man who'd worked on it in his place before, but that guy sure didn't know his job. He had messed it up. Shukov was now getting used to the wall like it was his own. 1 brick was too far in, and he had to lay 3 rows all over again to make it flush, and also lay the mortar on thicker. Then in another spot, the wall was bulging out a little, and he'd have to make that flush too. He figured out he'd split up the wall. The part he'd lay himself from the beginning on the left, and what Senka laid as far as Kilgas to the right. There on the corner, he guessed. Kilgas wouldn't be able to hold back, and he'd do some of Senka's job for him, so it'd be a little easier on Senka. And while they were busy at the corner, he'd put up more than half the wall here so they wouldn't get behind. And he figured out how many bricks he'd lay where. The minute they started bringing bricks up, he grabbed a hold of Aloysius. Bring them over to me. Put them over right over here. Senko was hacking off the last of the ice, and Shukov picked up a wire brush and started scrubbing the wall with it all over. He cleaned the top layer of bricks so they were a light gray color like dirty snow and got the ice out of the grooves. While he was still busy with his brush, Tyrion came up and set his yardstick at the corner. Shukov and Kogas had put theirs up a long time ago. Hey, Pavel shouted from below. Anybody still alive up there? Here we come with the Mordor. All right, guys, that's the end of your reading homework. That is the end of your reading homework. Remember, you need 5 annotations, and the annotation and the format is in your reading assignment sheet. God bless you and have a great day.